Let's just jump right into it. We are entering a completely new, incredibly visceral era of cinematic combat right now. Seriously, if you thought the previous installment pushed the boundaries of what we could see on screen, you haven't seen anything yet. Today, I want to completely tear into the bloody reality of this R-rated sequel. We're going to break down the overarching story, the deeply tragic character arcs, and of course, that uncompromising brutality that entirely defines this universe. Listen, this isn't just another generic action movie. Not at all. It's a deep, deep plunge into a mythology that has literally spanned decades. We are going to look incredibly closely at every single shadow, every drop of blood, and every little hint of dark magic to understand exactly what is at stake here for Earthrealm and beyond. Now, the historical context of the violence in this franchise is absolutely crucial to understand here. For decades, this universe has absolutely thrived on pushing the envelope of what is acceptable in terms of pure, unadulterated gore. And this sequel? Well, it's doubling down on that legacy in a big way, presenting a full-on, unapologetically bloody experience. But here's the thing you have to realize. This practical, unapologetic blood isn't just there for cheap shock value. It's fundamentally about honoring the visceral roots of the original games. When you see bones snap and blood spill in this universe, it carries a very heavy, tactile weight to it. It establishes this raw intensity, making it abundantly clear that every single fight could literally be a character's last. The danger is front and center, and the sheer brutality makes the insanely high stakes feel terrifyingly real. So, you might be wondering, in a universe that is this chaotic, a world completely overflowing with elder gods, soul-stealing sorcerers, and lethal ninjas who just casually return from the dead, who is actually going to ground us? We really need a fresh perspective, right? A human anchor to make sense of all this madness. And that grounding element, that completely hilariously unprepared lens into this terrifying world, comes to us in the form of Karl Urban's Johnny Cage. Through his incredibly arrogant, deeply unequipped eyes, we are going to navigate the intense complexities of colliding realms, dark magic, and interdimensional martial arts tournaments. Let me paint a picture of exactly who this specific version of Johnny Cage is, starting with his deeply pathetic opening scene. Imagine this. We find him sitting entirely alone at a dimly lit bar, nursing a drink, when a random fan barely even recognizes him. The cinematography here is wonderfully quiet and melancholic, which completely contrasts with the high-octane magic of the rest of the universe. It instantly establishes his current psychological state. He's a washed-up 90s action star, a guy who is practically treated as a walking joke by the general public. But the absolute brilliance here lies in the meta-humor. By having characters openly poke fun at his terrible movie reboots and franchise downfalls, it creates this clever, self-deprecating nod to the bumpy cinematic history of the franchise itself. Karl Urban absolutely nails this specific vibe. He's sarcastic, he's overconfident, yet he's desperately clinging to a faded glory that is about to be violently tested. Basically, Johnny perfectly steps into the critical role of the audience surrogate. Any lore-heavy universe like this requires a character who naturally asks, wait, what is this place? Or why is that guy shooting literal ice out of his bare hands? He performs the exact same function that Cole Young did in the first installment, but he does it with a wildly overconfident, borderline obnoxious energy that is just incredibly entertaining to watch. As these battle-hardened veterans of the tournament try to explain the life or death stakes to him, he is constantly confused, masking his sheer terror with cheap Hollywood sarcasm. This dynamic is brilliant because it allows the dense, mystical world-building to unfold completely naturally for us. It gives the narrative a really fresh, soft reboot feel while seamlessly maintaining the continuity of the established universe. Which brings us to a scene of profound, hilarious danger, the training sequence. Picture Johnny lined up alongside seasoned, battle-hardened fighters like Jax, Liu Kang, and Cole. The sheer absurdity of his presence becomes completely undeniable here. He blatantly points out his own terrifying reality to the group. Unlike the literal god of fire standing right next to him, he cannot shoot fireballs. He cannot summon lightning from the sky. Stripped of his massive Hollywood ego, he is just an actor who happens to know some martial arts. We really have to emphasize the sheer life or death stakes of this scenario for him. He is walking into an interdimensional bloodbath against four-armed monsters and shadow assassins with absolutely zero magical abilities to speak of. His vulnerability is entirely exposed for everyone to see. Now, this forces us to really dive deep into the specific lore of the Arcana. In this continuity, as we know, a combatant marked with the dragon symbol has to endure intense physical and emotional trauma to eventually unlock a unique magical ability. So, for hardcore fans, the agonizing question is how and when Johnny is going to unlock his. Will we finally see the manifestation of his iconic glowing green energy aura? You see, in the expansive mythology of the games, that green aura isn't just some random power. It's a direct manifestation of his ancient lineage, descending from a Mediterranean war cult bred specifically for the gods. Unlocking that specific power and making the transition from a fragile, arrogant actor to a supernaturally gifted warrior is going to be his ultimate character trial. It is the absolute crucible that he must survive. Section 1. The Mortal Kombat Tournament, Earthrealm's Last Stand. All right, the actual tournament is finally upon us, and guys, the stakes literally could not be more apocalyptic. Earthrealm has been suffering continuous, devastating defeats. If humanity loses even one more time, it faces absolute, irreversible annihilation, and driving that annihilation is a threat that has finally, mercifully stepped out of the shadows. Shao Kahn is no longer just a stone Easter egg looming in the background like a tease. No, he has arrived in the flesh as a towering, utterly terrifying antagonist. His imposing physicality, his dominating presence, and the sheer brutal threat he poses to every single fighter from Earthrealm completely shifts the gravity of the entire narrative. This is the Emperor of Outworld, a literal conqueror of realms, and his physical arrival means the grace period is officially over. Right in the middle of all this looming destruction, Kitana's narrative arc is shaping up to be an absolute blood-soaked tragedy. Visually, let's be honest, she looks flawless. She wields her lethal, game-accurate steel fans with absolutely deadly precision. But the real emotional core of her story lies in the tragic fall of Edenia. We are seeing these crucial flashback sequences that point directly to the death of her father, King Jerrod, at the hands of Shao Kahn. For those of you deeply entrenched in the mythos, you know Jerrod was the benevolent ruler of the Edenian realm before Kahn violently invaded, murdered him, forcefully married his queen, and then adopted Kitana as his own personal assassin. This devastating history is masterfully setting the stage for an inevitable, explosive betrayal. Kitana is clearly on a collision course with her adoptive father, slowly and carefully plotting her vengeance against the monstrous emperor who destroyed her true family and enslaved her entire world. Surrounding Kitana, we have characters whose visual direction perfectly captures the horrific beauty of this universe. Jade, who is traditionally Kitana's fiercest bodyguard and most loyal friend, sports this battle-hardened, bold new look that just radiates lethal efficiency. But I have to say, the true visual triumph here is the brilliant use of practical effects, specifically when it comes to the monstrous Baraka. You know, in an era that is completely dominated by weightless CGI, committing to tactile physical makeup makes the horror of Baraka's Tarkatan features so much more unsettling. When you actually see those jagged, protruding teeth and those massive arm blades rendered with physical prosthetics, it completely grounds the R-rated violence. It makes the monsters feel terrifyingly real, giving every single close-up shot of his grotesque visage a profound, nightmare-inducing weight. And then we have the massive, highly anticipated addition to the roster, Queen Sindel, Kitana's mother and the completely unwilling bride of Shao Kahn. Her dynamic is wildly unpredictable, constantly shifting in the lore between being a brainwashed villain and a deeply tragic anti-hero. Her brutal, kinetic energy on the battlefield is staggering to witness. We actually see her utilizing her devastating sonic scream, unleashing these massive shockwaves that physically shatter her opponents. But honestly, beyond the vocal destruction, the true visual potential lies in her iconic, prehensile hair. The sheer, terrifying kinetic energy of Sindel using her hair to literally grapple, constrict, and eviscerate enemies on screen promises to be one of the most uniquely savage combat spectacles we have ever witnessed in this entire franchise. Moving into Section 2, Return from the NetherRealm, A Dark Resurrection. Okay, so we are transitioning completely away from the physical battlegrounds of Earthrealm and Outworld, and we are plunging headfirst into a dimension of pure, suffocating dread, the NetherRealm. It is a literal hellscape of fire, jagged rock, and relentlessly chained souls. It is a dimension of perpetual suffering, where death is never actually a release, but merely a very painful transition. Deceased characters from the first go-around, warriors we clearly saw die incredibly brutal deaths like Kano and Kung Lao, are somehow inexplicably back. They are trapped in this absolute nightmare where fallen souls are actively manipulated, their flesh violently reconstructed, and their minds totally corrupted. And why? All so they can be reborn into the bloody combat they probably thought they had finally escaped. The architect of all this absolute suffering, the sinister driving force pulling these souls from the abyss, is none other than Quan Chi. Let me be clear, he is not merely some generic wizard. He is the ultimate calculating schemer of this entire universe. As the premier necromancer of the NetherRealm, his mastery over dark magic fundamentally shifts the entire balance of power in the tournament. He doesn't resurrect fallen champions out of mercy, obviously. No, he actively rips dead combatants back into the fold, stripping away their free will entirely to serve his own incredibly dark, labyrinthine agendas. He is the pale, grinning puppet master pulling the strings of a massive undead army, playing a game that even Shao Kahn himself might not fully comprehend. But the ultimate, most tragic consequence of Quan Chi's dark magic is the terrifying rebirth of Sub-Zero. After Bihan's brutal, agonizing death in the previous tournament, his soul descended straight into the NetherRealm. But he isn't just resurrected, he is fundamentally desecrated. Stripped of all remaining humanity, his iconic ice powers are corrupted into pure, suffocating darkness. He returns as the shadowy, completely evil entity known as Noob Saibot. This profound transformation from a proud Lin Kuei Grandmaster into an undead wraith driven by pure malice is, without a doubt, one of the darkest, most beloved pieces of the mythology. It perfectly represents the total tragic destruction of a warrior's soul, which is then weaponized purely for revenge. When the chaotic battle rages against this terrifying shadow wraith, everything suddenly just stops. For one visceral, history-laden moment, through the hellfire and the loud clashing of blades, that iconic roar echoes across the entire battlefield. Get over here. I mean, just hearing Scorpion shout his legendary catchphrase against the corrupted, monstrous form of the exact man who murdered his family, that is the bloody, emotional core of this entire decades-long rivalry. It carries the immense cinematic weight of unyielding vengeance, and it is perfectly executed in the very heart of the underworld's absolute chaos. Goosebumps, seriously. Yet, taking a step back from all this pure adrenaline of these reveals, we have to engage in some critical analysis for a second. Modern marketing has this really dangerous tendency to sacrifice the tension of a final act just to build massive immediate hype. When we are shown incredibly pivotal sequences out of context, like Katana executing a direct, brutal blade attack on Shao Kahn, we really have to wonder if the curtain is being pulled back way too far. Showing a sequence that feels like it belongs in the massive climax risks inadvertently spoiling the ultimate payoff for all of us. So we are left to weigh whether this footage completely ruins the surprise, or if it merely acts as a brilliant piece of misdirection, teasing a third act that is even crazier and more unpredictable than we can even imagine right now. This actually brings us to a really deep lore discussion regarding the structure of our heroes, specifically addressing the devoted hardcore fans of Liu Kang. Traditionally, as we all know, Liu Kang is the undisputed central champion. Seeing him share the spotlight so heavily with an ensemble cast might feel a little jarring to purists at first. But listen, building a massive shared cinematic universe requires passing the baton. By rotating the focal point, bringing in Cole Young, shifting the lens over to Johnny Cage, all while keeping Liu Kang as this vital, god-tier presence in the background, the overarching narrative weaves a much wider, more intricate tapestry. It completely ensures the mythology has the breathing room to let different warriors from all different realms and lineages step fully into their own glorious, violent moments of destiny. So, looking at the big picture, ultimately, everything we have meticulously unpacked here points to a massive, unapologetic celebration of a deeply dense mythology. The architects behind this vision clearly possess an undeniable, profound respect for the brutal roots we all grew up with. If the execution holds up, if the pacing manages to perfectly balance this colossal roster of gods, ninjas, and sorcerers without losing its emotional core along the way, we are looking at the birth of a genuine R-rated action masterpiece. It is a bold, uncompromising vision that absolutely refuses to sanitize its edges, aiming directly at the bleeding heart of what makes this universe so enduringly captivating after all these years. We have analyzed the washed-up heroes desperately seeking redemption, the shadow ninjas literally clawing their way out of hell, and the looming emperors threatening to consume all of reality. The board is meticulously set, and the realms are officially colliding. So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. When the heavens finally crack open, when the blood actually starts spilling and the agonizing fatalities begin to unfold, whose corner are you really in? Look at this legendary roster, fully understand the apocalyptic stakes at play, and ask yourself, who are you most incredibly excited to watch fight for their very soul? Keep delving into the shadows of the lore and brace yourself for the onslaught.